This week you're gonna get some exposure, and thankfully it's not the type of exposure Lauren Boebert's ex-husband normally engages in, it's northern exposure. Because this week's political figure episode is Mary Peltola, the congresswoman from Alaska's first and only congressional district. Yeah, they only have one. A very big state, but very few people live there. It is in fact the largest congressional district in the United States via land mass, because it's all of Alaska. Now, I really hope you stick around for this one because I loved every moment of research on this episode, and I knew nothing about it going in. Nothing about the candidate, nothing about the district. I don't love everything about this because I agree with everything about this candidate. In fact, I love it more because I don't. But I really, really love it because I never dreamed that the place of Palin would be the place giving me hope for the American political system. So I really hope you stick around for this one. But without further ado, Mary Sattler Peltola was born August 31st, 1973 in Anchorage, Alaska. She's an Alaskan native, and when I say native, I mean native. Yapaic, I want to say, and I'm sure I'm butchering that. There's like an apostrophe and stuff. I've no idea how to actually pronounce it. I tried looking it up, and I hope I'm doing it close. Her mom was a native from Alaska. Her dad moved to Alaska from Nebraska to be a pilot and teacher. And if that sounds like a strange combination of careers, you have to remember that a Cessna is basically the Civic of Alaska. In the words of Doc Brown, where we're going, we don't need roads. I couldn't find much about her early education, but it said she traveled a lot with her father, so I'm kind of assuming that she was just on-the-go schooled by her pilot teacher father. However, she would go on to study elementary education herself at a number of universities, finally ending up at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. During this time, she also worked for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and interned with the Alaska legislature. In '98, she was elected to the Alaska State House of Representatives, where she spent her time advocating for natives' rights and education. She authored a bill that was signed into law that allowed Alaskan teachers to be exempt from jury duty if their schools were underperforming. This may sound like a weird law, but you got to remember that traveling in Alaska can be very cumbersome. Many of the schools suffer from woeful lack of resources, and a teacher being forced to leave her students for days or weeks at a time to attend jury duty can be very detrimental to their education. She was also critical of No Child Left Behind because, she had a brain, and she served on numerous committees that advocated for rural Alaskans and underserved communities. After 2008, she worked on a number of community development and conservation programs. She was elected to the Bethel City Council, and here's where it really starts to get interesting because Peltola, a Democrat, had shown her ability to be bipartisan pretty much at every turn in her career up to this point. And then in 2010, Republican U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski lost her primary bid for re-election. And Mary Peltola helped her organize and run a successful write-in campaign. And this is cool, not because she helped a Republican get re-elected to the U.S. Senate, but because she took her own political ideologies out of a situation, looked and said, you know what, I think this person is the best option to represent Alaska, currently running. Then she put in the work to give Alaska residents the option to re-elect her via a write-in campaign, which is just insane. And I think the value of this sort of thing has really been lost in modern identity partisan politics. See, Alaska's a very red state, but Sarah Palin notwithstanding, they tend to be a very moderate red state. They like moderate candidates that are a little bit more reasonable and can get some shit done. So while party politics will usually supersede, and given the option, Alaskans will still elect an extreme right Republican simply because of the R in front of their name over a Democrat. If you give them the option between some extreme right MAGA candidate scraped off the bottom of the loony bin and a moderate conservative, they'll still generally go for that moderate conservative. Think if this was a more common practice nationwide. If the Democratic Party started working with Republican candidates in deep red states and districts, and the Republican Party started working with Democratic candidates in deep blue states and districts, and they say, hey, we know that we're not going to be competitive in these particular races, but we want somebody here who A, best represents all of the constituents in the district, and somebody who we can work together with and be bipartisan on to get some stuff done. Because let's be honest, the Republican Party doesn't want the Lauren Boebert and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world in their party. And there are numerous democratically held districts around the country where progressives and conservatives could agree on people that they would feel both would better represent their interests. And with support from opposition party members in districts like that, we could get candidates that we all want more than what we currently have. Sorry, I just thought that was super cool, and I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but back to Mary Peltola. She also served on various tribal committee and councils until she got elected to the United States House of Representatives in 2022 via ranked choice voting, which is another thing I just absolutely love about this story because we need ranked choice voting, and Alaska was one of the last places I would have bet on implementing it. This gave Alaskan voters way more options to pick the candidate they really wanted, and it really worked. And on top of that, it just keeps getting better and better because she beat Sarah fucking Palin for the seat. How fucking cool is that? Because I knew Sarah Palin was still trying to kind of be relevant out there doing shit like The Masked Singer. And she's like, hey, maybe I'll get back into politics, and ranked choice voting was like, whoa, that's gonna be a no from me, dog. dog. On top of this, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who we talked about earlier, endorsed Peltola and said she was going to vote for her. It just goes to show once again that working together works both ways, and people get candidates they actually want who actually represent their interests. On top of that, she also got endorsements from Don Young's daughter, whose father had passed away just months prior to this. And Don Young, who Mary's dad campaigned for and was her earliest experience to politics, was a Republican and Alaska's longest serving politician. It's just beautiful. It's heartwarming. It's hopeful, you know, that if Alaska can achieve these kinds of things, maybe we all can. So between ranked choice voting and bipartisan efforts to give Alaskans the best candidates possible to represent them, Mary became the 4th ever Native woman elected to Congress. Also the first Alaskan Native represented to Congress and the first woman to represent Alaska in Congress. And that's pretty cool. She wasted no time getting busy because within a few months of being elected, she got her first bill passed through the House, which is unheard of for a freshman congressperson. It wasn't like naming a post office or some dumb shit like the only thing my congressman Pete Stauber has ever passed. No, it was a bill to create an Office of Food Security for veterans. That's some pretty badass shit to come out of the gate with. And then during the 2022 railroad labor dispute, you know, the one where Biden screwed over the railroad union right before turning around and saying that he was the best president for labor since FDR. Well, Mary was one of only 8 Democrats to stand up against her party and vote against that bullshit in favor of the union. Brand new to Congress and already a boss, not afraid to make waves for what's right, regardless of what her party fucking says. She also voted in favor of the Willow Project, which is, you know, to allow more oil drilling in Alaska, which I was highly critical of, still highly critical of, and do not agree with her doing that. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of this whole story and of her because I agree with everything she does. In fact, I pretty strongly disagree with this. But the reality is that she represents Alaska, and these kind of economic projects are popular with her constituents in Alaska, so she's doing her job. Unlike Pete Stauber, my representative, who takes huge amounts of money from the oil and gas industry despite my state being completely devoid of oil and gas. See, it's hard to be super pissed for her voting in her constituents' interests simply because I disagree with them. However, Pete, it's easy to be pissed at you for voting in her constituents' interests and not ours, here in your fucking state of Minnesota. Sorry, I'm a little salty. Pete Stauber is horrible. Continuing with her bipartisan efforts to best represent her constituents, she hired Republican staffers, including one of her former opponents in the congressional race, to help run her home office operation and her campaign. I'm telling you guys, this is the model for the places that have gotten so partisan or so gerrymandered that nobody from either party is truly represented. Anyway, she's voted in favor of LGBTQ rights. She's voted very moderately on environmental stuff. You know, she supports a lot of conservation things, but also obviously supported the Willow Project. She's voted a tad bit more moderately on immigration than personally I would have liked. And she actually voted with Republicans on her only gun legislation vote, which was Resolution 44 to repeal the ATF's new regulation on pistol braces, which I wholeheartedly agree with because this is one of the many gun laws on the books that is ridiculous and makes it nearly impossible to take anybody who utters the words common sense gun laws seriously. And if you don't know what a pistol brace is or how it can accidentally turn a person into a felon for no good reason, well, that's my point. Anyway, sadly, last year, Mary lost her husband in a plane crash, but she is still fighting the good fight and running for re-election this year. Now, obviously, I'm a huge fan, not because I believe or agree with all of her policies, but because I believe that this is what politicians are supposed to do, how they're supposed to look, how they're supposed to work within our government. You know, they're public servants, and everything I've seen, she puts public service before partisan politics. So Alaska, props to you guys for showing us how things should be done, what could be done, and showing us that ranked choice voting works. And if you have ranked choice voting, you avoid Sarah Palin. I don't know if there's a better argument for ranked choice voting than that. Anyway, you guys are really lucky to have her, and I hope to see you send her back to Washington in November.